put in a 3-page summary in the packet that everybody can read. It goes through what we've been doing, what the sources of concern are, tries to provide an entire summary of what's been done for the last 4 or 5 months. Rather than go through that and read it, I wanted to offer some perspective and introductory comments before I open up to the board for discussion. One of the things I've been probably most frustrated about with this is just an unwillingness for everybody to come together, talk about it, and come to some logical solutions. It's been the town is in pretty bad shape because of the arguments and discussions that have gone on. So with that in mind, the issue before us tonight is whether lake-enhanced boating operations should be singled out as the sole cause of lake damage and safety concerns, and whether that warrants an ordinance by the town board. That assumption overlooks the reality that multiple activities and behaviors contribute to both lake damage and public safety. For the past 5 months, this board has taken a pragmatic approach, gathering information from all sides, listening to experts, considering comments from residents from the first 4 months of the year, and considering both science and common sense. Our goal has been to fully understand the true level of impact, weigh the alternatives, and identify the cost of the most effective, balanced, and realistic solutions without resorting to excessive use of authority. Authority must always be exercised with restraint, and the board has the obligation and responsibility to understand thoroughly and validate all information they receive. Here's what I believe we know today. Wake boats and most large watercraft can cause bottom damage in less than 10 feet of water. Large boats and motors will cause damage in shallow water, period. Large waves, whether from boats or wind, can affect shoreline safety and property. The overall volume of boats and large motors creates congestion, rough water, and safety concerns. Lake Beulah has over 50 feet depth and sufficient space to support skiing and wake surfing. That may be debatable to some, but there's enough surface area to be able to do it, and that's what we're here to talk about. It's well beyond the depths associated with measurable damage. I'd like to ask a few rhetorical questions here that I would ask everyone to consider as we move forward with this, including the board. Why do these groups purposely and knowingly continue to damage the lake bottom of Lake Beulah with unnecessary tests in shallow water? I'm confident that most of us know damage occurs in shallow water. Why is there no super aggressive action on the part of LBND to deploy buoys, educate voters, and influence behavior? If the devastation to the lake is as great as all these groups are shouting, why are they doing nothing within their sphere of influence to control or stop this devastation now? Why instead are they flooding the community with aggressive, constant messaging, calling for a ban and calling out the town board for not blindly honoring their wishes to ban? Just ask yourself the question of the lack of specific action, the lack of severe sphere of control activity, and the exhaustive messaging. Are we laying the groundwork for some future study? I don't know, but I don't understand it. It's been my mission all summer to identify things we could be doing, and there has been nobody willing to do them. We talk about them, we look like we're doing something, but nothing was done on the lake. The central question is whether lake-enhanced boating rises above all other concerns to justify a specific town ban or other town restrictions. It is a more measured approach, the right course of action for Lake Beulah. The public trust doctrine constitutionally establishes all water will remain forever free and available to the public. This is a serious matter for the town to consider. It poses legal implications, and given the lack of action by the state legislature, the question of wake enhancement falls to the local municipalities by default. Let's look at what's going on within our state and nationally for just a moment. I've put hundreds of hours into this, I'm telling you, hundreds of hours. So I know PLB has put a ton of time into it, I have also. There are websites touting over 300 lakes and 63 ordinances within the state that have implemented some sort of municipal restrictions. To put this into perspective, 300 out of 15,000 total lakes within Wisconsin is 2%. And 63 local wake enhancement ordinances out of approximately 1,883 municipalities is about 3.3%. It is an exhaustive task to research every one of these 63 ordinances, so I picked the first 11 in the list just to try and get a flavor for what's in there. When analyzing 14 water bodies represented by 11 ordinances, which is 17.5% of the 63, identified by, I think it's Last Wilderness Alliance. 2 are rivers, 3 are greater than 150 acres, but no more than 300 acres, so relatively small. And the remaining 9, 64.3%, are less than 150 acres and not necessarily shallow. Many of the ordinances are for only one lake of many within a municipality, so it's not just ban the whole town, they focused on a single lake. There's a lot of different things that have been done. Not all local ordinances are 100% banned. Rather, restrictions were imposed. Several restrictions focused on distance from shoreline and water depth, which the DNR states is nearly impossible to enforce. Rather, the DNR would prefer lake zones of some sort, which are a little easier. Lake zones can be mapped out and provide a depth associated with that zone, and that makes it a little easier for the police to be able to monitor and enforce. And guys, please enter in. If there's some policing issues, please feel free to jump in. 63 of the 63 ordinances, rivers are also included, not just lakes. I'm not sure how many rivers, like I said, I didn't go through this all. My issue here is, why is the list so secretive and unavailable? If the number of ordinances is so compelling and the stiffness of the limitations are so strong, why would Last Wilderness Alliance or Lakes at Stake or anyone else not want to make this information available to people? It doesn't make sense to me. This would be a great selling point for their case, but would also allow individuals and municipal boards to independently verify the results. That's what I've been looking for, and I haven't been able to find it. When you look at the states, so this is state level statutes or laws. I see that there's Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina, Virginia, Vermont, Maine, New Hampshire, and Minnesota. Of these, most of them are distances from shore. In most of them, they establish 200 feet or 400 feet or 300 feet. There are 3 that offer a depth, which again, I just said the DNR says that's really hard to enforce, so I'm not quite sure what these states are doing by doing this. But so that's what's going on the United States level, and none of it's a ban. Okay, so just a point of reference that I want everybody to follow.
Can I speak to page 1, section 2 of your outline regarding the legal aspect of it. There is pending litigation up north, against the town of Scott that had a ban ordinance. I suspect the reason why you're not finding the list of the 63 municipal ordinances is because I believe it was alleged the town of Scott borrowed a sample ordinance that the majority of these other municipalities likely passed as well. So whatever happens in this town of Scott case on whether or not you can outright ban an activity is going to affect a lot of those 63 other ordinances. I too am interested to see how the court wrestles with the public trust doctrine and an outright ban. I think we would need some guidance here before I would suggest that this board even consider an outright ban ordinance. Otherwise, we're putting ourselves right in the line of fire to be sued again. I do know that the plaintiff's attorney in that town of Scott case was at our annual meeting, and he has been asking for updates as to what we are doing with our ordinance. So, it's not that I really shy away from this attorney or the threat of litigation, but since it's already being litigated, let's see what the court does with the public trust doctrine, and that will give us better legal footing. If we want to impose a ban ordinance, I think we better take a wait and see approach. That's my legal opinion on this.
Okay. The one last thing that the St. Anthony Falls, phase 2 study came out, and I'm not gonna go through, I don't even know how many pages, it's a big report. I went to the executive summary, and just the recommendations they've offered are operate in greater than or equal to 10 feet water depth when in planing or displacement mode. Wake boats in surf mode operate in greater than 20 feet depth. That's what they're suggesting. In shallow water, which is less than 10 foot, boats should move as slowly as possible. No wake to reduce impacts. And avoid vegetated areas, as all boats can damage aquatic plants. So that's where phase 2.
Sorry, I have another
Go
question.
ahead.
This study is the lake-specific study that you're referring to, correct?
In Minnesota.
Oh, what about the local one? Because another aspect of that pending litigation was the sample ordinance was not lake-specific. So I think the board was waiting on a lake-specific study for Lake Beulah, and I thought I read in your materials it came out like 2 weeks ago.
It did.
I'd like to see it.
Oh, I think I have a copy. It was forwarded by somebody, so I think.
And what was the conclusion?
Well, I was at the LBND, August 25th meeting, and, there really was no, the conclusion is that if you're in shallow water, you're gonna damage lakes. When he was asked specifically, do you recommend a ban, he said no. When he was asked specifically, did LBND or PLB ask him for his opinion on Russian life, he said no. And then on top of that, he went into a discussion about behavior. It's mostly about behavior. He said his lake, North Lake, I think I covered it in my written one, but not in my comments here. North Lake, he said they found a way to operate in communion, and there are no ordinances or anything that govern that. They work.
That's the North Lake in northern Waukesha County?
I
by Shaniqua?
I think so.
Yes.
Yes. And then, we know of Powers Lake, which is another lake, and I think it's more in Kenosha. They're in the same situation. They reached across the aisle, they talked aggressively, they've established some basic rules that they're gonna both live with. I think they've gone to the level of when the yacht club's not out, they call the wake boaters and say, hey, it's your turn. And then when the wake boaters aren't out, they tell the yacht lovers to go out and do your sailboating thing. So it's a cooperative working relationship, and that's what really I thought came out of the Terra Vigilis report that I saw. Some things I want to go further. Again, this is to attempt to frame the whole big discussion, and then I want to open it up, and you guys offer your input. You know, we can do whatever we want at this point. The main reason for offering this at this time, I know I took commentary about showing up all of a sudden on the agenda. The issue has been that we've been told to wait for this report. It just came out on 8/22. We're looking at everybody going back home in the off season. So when are we going to be able to have this public hearing? When are we going to get everybody together? And I think it's very unfair to not include everybody. We have taxpayers that pay a lot of tax that live on Lake Beulah and actually on Potters Lake that are out of state, that can't vote in our elections here. So they're paying taxes, they should have some say on this. That's all my point is. So I would like to make it more of a weekend deal, and make sure everybody can participate. But, just as a few more comments here. We almost must recognize our roles and responsibilities. Lake districts were created under Chapter 33 to manage and protect lakes. If a district is unwilling or unable to fulfill that responsibility, then it calls into question their purpose and funding. It is not reasonable for lake districts to constantly defer all management responsibilities to the town while still collecting substantial tax levies. It seems amazing to me that after writing my letter on June 23rd to identify some very basic actions that LDMD could take to protect the lake, there is still nothing formally and physically implemented. Not even a partial implementation of buoys in designated areas to test whether boaters' behaviors can be positively influenced. In talking with the Potters Lake group, they are laser focused on their responsibilities to protect the lake. Their actions are focused on the lake. Their lake community is based on mutual respect, and it is my understanding after a couple of conversations, they have no formal opinion on an ordinance at this time. Obviously, whatever we decide, we'll have to engage with them again and see where we go. I do not know at this time if Army Lake has any concerns and any desire to be part of the ordinance. I have not reached out to them at all. I did trade emails with a riparian owner on Lake Beulah recently who explained, and he was a banner. He wanted to ban wake boats on Lake Beulah, but a very constructive, engaging individual. I found him very intriguing. He said, what already exists is a Chapter 30 statute governing excessive waste. This is a law that should be promoted, and with additional enforcement next year, this can be enforced in addition to all the other voting statutes and ordinances. It is Wisconsin Statute 30.68 sub 4, prohibited operation. No person shall operate a motorboat so as to approach or pass another boat in such a manner as to create hazardous wake or wash. I believe there's also a 100-foot rule. 100-foot rule. So it already exists. There's stuff on the books that can be enforced. The reality is that some in the community are focused solely on a ban, unwilling to consider education, enforcement, and phased approaches employing progressively stricter restrictions as implemented restrictions proved non-effective. Yet other lake districts throughout the state have addressed similar concerns through stakeholder cooperation, education, voluntary compliance without ordinances. And I just spoke of that, North Lake and Powers Lake, and I'm sure there's more. I'm at the end of my exhaustive research capacity.
Joe, if I can
Yes,
sort of
sir.
recognize again, I don't know, is there a wake boat owner here tonight? Is it okay if I ask a question?
Sure.
I had a pre-trial conference at municipal court last Thursday for a wake boat owner who was issued a slow no wake ticket. His argument to me was, even though he was in the slow no wake hours, in order to maintain proper steering, it's impossible for him to operate his wake boat without creating a wake.
Oh, wake surfing, or just driving?
Traveling.
No, you can follow slow and wake.
Okay. I'm like, boy, if that's true,
No,
that adds a new wrinkle.
the whole point of the ban is to ban the use of ballast tanks and features that create wakes. So if they don't have that ballast tank full or using any of those features, they're like any other boat, and they should be able to go slow no wakes. So anyway, this path has proven effective elsewhere, and it was advocated by expert last year at PLD by Dr. Ellinger from the UW of Milwaukee, who was originally working with PLD, but did not want to be part of a campaign to achieve a predetermined specific outcome of banning. My wife and I attended that meeting May of 2024, and it was at Alpine Valley, and I was actually quite encouraged by his approach. I wish we would have headed down that path. Our board has already identified steps to improve enforcement for the 2026 season. I thank Deputy Chief Runge and Chief Durecki. We will address those during budget discussions if we get a decision and written commitment from LDND. If we pair increased enforcement with clear communication on where certain boating activities are appropriate, we can significantly reduce damage without preemptively removing people's rights. Ultimately, our duty as town board members is to act with a total town perspective, protecting our community, our lakes, our residents in good faith, and by working with town taxpayer-funded lake districts. The steps we are considering are reasonable, immediately available, and have always been within the authority of the lake districts to implement. Common sense measures could already have been in place on Lake Beulah for the 2025 season to help direct boaters to proper areas on the lake, if all stakeholders had been willing to collaborate. Tonight, the decision before us is to determine when a public hearing should be scheduled for everyone to present their case for one final time, and whether to move forward with an ordinance framework. We can't make a decision tonight. We can decide to move forward with an ordinance framework, but there's a lot of work that has to be done. In fact, I gave everybody, might have been June, a summary of the DNR steps that are required to get that done. It's minimally probably a 150-day process. On the long term, it could be 240 days. It's in that report. I think it's even on the website, right? Whether to move forward with an ordinance framework or alternatively to pursue a practical, measured, and cooperative approach that addresses concerns while respecting rights. And just finally, the reason for having this now is to try and get everybody that's in town yet before they leave to be a part of this discussion. So I'll open it up. Attorney Mills, do you have anything more to offer? Or?
I would actually like to ask the attorney that filed the lawsuit if the DNR actually approved these ban ordinances. I can't imagine they did.
I can offer commentary. I've done a lot of research on this. I've asked for condition reports. One of the things, I don't think the DNR has scrutinized this stuff as tightly as I think they should. What they rely on is a condition report. And the condition, what I saw, and I'm not against banning if it's appropriate, okay? I just want everybody to understand. I'm trying to evaluate the situation on an even keel. And the condition reports were very anecdotal. You know, if I drive my wake boat through shallow 10-foot water, I'm gonna damage the lake. That doesn't mean you ban it as a result of that. You go to deeper water. Now, the discussion for Lake Beulah is, if we go to that deeper water, is it still sufficient to support it? And are there any other issues that are impacted by it? That's really the only, because we have 58 feet of water in 3 different locations, to the best of my knowledge.
No. One spot.
Okay, 50 plus. Anyway, I guess at this point I would open it up for any input, commentary, discussion, motions or actions.
I would think that we need to start with an ordinance framework that has to identify distance from shore and depth based on what the recent testing on Lake Beulah provided. Now, I believe that there were numbers in there, and I believe it was 200 feet from shore and at least 20 feet deep.
Yeah,
But-
500. I read it.
400. But, I also think we need to mark the humps that are out there. The humps are very unique and are easily damaged because they're elevated, even in those deep waters. Those humps, unless you know the lake specifically, you're not prepared for that hump, and that needs to be marked. I believe the humps are aquatic habitat for breeding of our fish, and that I think is significant to take in special consideration. I also think that you need to look at, you know, if you're gonna create a zone based on the depth and distance from shore, that we need to think about what's a safe number of boats in there. If our police department doesn't have those guidelines, how are they able to enforce if that doesn't exist? I would think that that's the minimum that our ordinance needs to have in its framework. Distance, depth, marking of the humps, and, number of safe boats in the zone. We don't have a lake like North Lake. North Lake are 2 bowls of water with more greater depth throughout them. We have, 3 big lakes that are connected by channels, and so we have more sensitive area and more area that is easier to damage by the powerful boats, whether they be wake or any fishing boats. I don't care what boats they are. And we need to think about the bottom of the lake, given that it is a marl bottom, which means it's soft, it's got pockets of air and the layers of the creation of that bottom. And the pressure coming off the boats is what's disturbing the bottom of the lake.